This is Curious Brain Farts.
Welcome to Curious Brain Farts.
Thank you. It's the show where two ordinary people, Lou and I, chat about something we're curious about.
What do we mean by a curious brain fart?
Simply put, it's Lou and I having a chat about something as we normally would do, that piques our interest in some way. I nearly said perks.
Perks, peaks, same thing.
So it became sort of periodics.
Hybrid words. That's another curious brain fart. It's one for the list. So, Paul.
Yes, Louise.
Listeners, he made a gormless face and it made me laugh. I'm not apologising for it. And that's that. Mic drop. Anyway, before I drop the mic.
Please don't. They're actually quite expensive.
Paul, how can people get in touch with us if they've got something interesting or even just something that they want us to be curious about?
Well, they could start off by getting some letterhead paper and a wax seal. And if you just write Curious Brain Farts and stick it in the post, it will make its way to us.
Like when people send a letter to Father Christmas.
Precisely. There's another way. You could also drop us an email, thankfully. Drop us an email to curiousbrainfarts@gmail.com. Buongiorno.
Hola.
Sí, vale.
¿Cómo estás?
3 BNs.
Very good.
How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. I'm having a delicious cup of coffee,
Oh, yeah?
which I'm very much enjoying. How are you doing today?
All right. I was just thinking about something. Sometimes people might talk about parallel activities, doing something at the same time.
Doing two things at once?
Yeah. And then I was thinking, so what do you call tandeming? Because you're not parallel, you're in series.
What?
Well, you're one behind the other on a tandem. So
Yes.
that's not parallel, that's in series.
The difference is
Then ones that you get down the
parallel
beach.
activities are surely one person doing more than one thing at once. Not two people doing the same thing at the same time, or two people doing you're chopping the onions and I'm chopping the carrots. That's not multitasking. That's just two people doing one thing at the same time.
Parallel processing. So a computer can do parallel processing. And it has more than one processor.
Yes.
So, I mean, you're welcome.
That's amazing.
Amazing.
Yeah.
I just thought it was quite amusing. Parallel cycling.
It would be difficult to fit through quite a lot of gaps, would it not? But there's not three people in a line, is there?
What, on a tandem?
A tandem's two,
Yeah, well, it'd be a trandem, wouldn't it?
but is there, you've got a tricycle.
Sounds like a genre of dance music.
Trandem tings. Like Mandem.
Trandem. Transcendent dem. We're nailing this.
Aren't we though? And although this rambling is VG. Super.
The OG of VG rambling.
If we were going to talk about something
Yeah.
in a more boundary
Right.
topic type of
Right,
way,
yeah.
what could that be, do we think?
Well, we have a choice. We can use the randomizer, or we can just spout something.
Why don't you spout something from your brain? Give us a fart.
Okay. Let's go with something really light and easy.
Go for it.
Self-awareness.
Amazing. Self-awareness. Well,
Do we not need to...
define.
Okay, fine.
Paul's just looking that up, dear listeners,
Yeah,
as
please
I
hold.
fill. And I'm just tuning into my own level of self-awareness.
Good.
If I could put that on a graph, I think that would not be a steady line. It'd be yeeting and yoinking all over the place.
Oh, that's good. Right, so here we go. This is according to Oxford Languages. Self-awareness, conscious knowledge of one's own character and feelings.
Conscious knowledge of character and feelings.
One's own character and feelings. The process can be painful, but it leads to a greater self-awareness. I'd agree that self-awareness is not comfortable.
No, it's like if you view your kind of character and your thoughts and feelings as a room, self-awareness is when you get a torch and shine it into all the dusty corners and look at all the cobwebs and the spiders and the wood
Not the
lice.
manicured areas.
No, well, you might have a nice rug in the middle where you spend a lot of time. But there are edges and bits you don't want to look at and gloomy
It could be quite a big
things.
room.
Yeah, it could be. And it could be that you choose to stay in the well-lit areas that you're familiar with and you know.
Might be partitioned.
Could be. Could easily be partitioned.
I think visualising it like that is quite helpful. You know, maybe it's not a room, maybe it's a house or something. You know, and that is your self-awareness, and you might like to hang out more in one place than another, and you might never go in the attic or in the basement.
Yep.
Or in the understairs cupboard.
Yep. Other than if you're Harry Potter.
Harry Potter.
You're a wizard, Harry. Yeah, I think I'm a very visual person, as you know, and so for me, visualising it in some way helps me.
Great.
So maybe it helps you too. I don't know.
So, self-awareness, because constructing areas, you know, we are aware of certain... I am aware. I need to stop saying we. I am aware of certain areas of myself, and I am deliberately or otherwise unaware of other areas of myself. And whilst getting input from others can be useful in raising self-awareness, that is also biased and not about yourself. It's about another person's view of you. So, for example, someone might say, "Oh, you laugh and joke about too much." And for them, that's absolutely right. And for someone else, that could be you're jolly and happy and warm and easy to engage with.
Yeah, exactly.
So neither of those things contribute necessarily to self-awareness. The question would be, why? Why are you like that? Why do you like to be jolly and whatever? Do you see what I mean?
I do. Yeah, I do see what... And in the house, because it's not a room anymore, in the house of my character,
it's a characterful house.
There's a library, and in that library are some books, and those are the stories that I tell to myself about myself, which are
short
and made up by me.
Yeah, you are the author.
So that I find that notion really empowering. Actually, the things I think and feel are mine, and I have constructed them, and therefore I can construct other things. So if I look at that bookshelf of stories, and one of the stories might be called I'm Not Good Enough, or I'm Not Worthy of Being Loved, or...
I've got that in my library.
Have you? Yeah, it's a popular title. It's
Is
a
it?
#1 bestseller.
Yeah.
Or I'm afraid...
I think I've got several copies of I'm Not Good Enough as well.
Yeah. You lose one, and then it's under the sofa, so you buy
fine.
another one.
Yeah.
Classic. We've all done it. And another one I've got is, I'm afraid of getting the things I want.
Yeah.
And that's a linked. It's in a series with I'm not good enough.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm also afraid of, I think fear is a big theme in my library, if I'm honest, that I'm afraid of not being loved and not being worthy of that. And so I find it really, really helpful to there's a bookcase. These are the stories. And I get them down, I have a look at them. And actually, do I like that story? Does that story help or serve me? Well, it does serve to keep me safe and contained, and that's okay. There's absolutely nothing wrong with it. However, I am the writer of my own stories. So if I've written all of these stories about myself, then it's a beautiful, beautiful thing to think, well, actually, the rest of this library is filled with volumes that don't have anything in them yet.
What I love about that visual is, for me, it's a bit gloomy because it's like fear and shame and doubt and stuff like this. And that's sort of like the dark section. Mm-hmm. And then there's this whole other section that is a bit sparse. Mm-hmm. And it's much more joyful and lighter. That part of the room is even lighter. Mm-hmm. It's not so eerie and gloomy as the other side. And it made me think of two things, and I can only remember one of them, so hopefully the other one will pop into my head. I've been reading Brené Brown's Atlas of the Heart. Mm-hmm. We love you, Brené. Brené. We want to be your friend.
Big love, not in a stalkery weird way.
No.
Just rethink your race.
In a mutual sort of, okay way. Mm-hmm. And she was talking about her experience of finding the edges. So when I think about self-awareness, there's lots of things to it. And this image came into my head around knowing the edges. Mm-hmm. And so her example was around doing too much, being very intense, the perfectionist taking over, working crazy hours, being really fatigued and all the rest of it. And then she started to notice, so what am I doing? Mm-hmm. Interesting. I am stretching myself quite far. Yeah. And I'm getting to the edges. And by the way, the edges are a bit jagged, and a bit sharp.
They hurt.
And they're not nice for me or others. Mm-hmm. And that was part of her self-awareness in understanding where the edges are, which I think is a really, really important point. And the other thing I was thinking about was, even in those areas of the library that are maybe look a bit scary or invoke an anxiety or something like this, or a stress, thinking about part of self-awareness is knowing I've written that story.
Yes.
And it's trying to serve a purpose, which is not destructive of myself. No. And yet it might be having that effect. Yes. And so therefore, how can I route the energy associated with that? So instead of, maybe in somebody's library, anger is a big thing, and it might turn up in different ways. It's part of my library for sure.
And mine.
And using that energy of anger in a different way. So being self-aware enough to understand how my anger is showing up. When I start feeling angry, where does that begin? What does that look and feel like? What are the things I'm saying and doing? What do I notice in my body, in my mind? And then thinking, wow, that is generating a huge amount of energy. I wonder how I could use that differently. So those two things I was thinking about, Brené, the legend, and this other idea of being able to repurpose even negative energy, perceived negative energy. Sorry.
I like that, perceived negative energy, because actually it's just energy. Mm-hmm. And so the way I look at that gloomier part of my library is to say, well, actually, I'm revamping it. I'm going to do a makeover. And there is no... And part of that makeover is, yes, repainting the walls, putting in better lighting and so on. but fundamentally taking down the volumes in that section, and I have I have the capability to rewrite all of those stories so that I'm still safe and I'm still secure, and those stories are not necessary for me, which is kind of, limiting beliefs really, which is what we're tuning into. But actually, so I'm noticing that there isn't a space for that part of the library anymore, and it served me really well, and I'm grateful for it, and I don't need it. So I'm in a redrafting phase, a revamping phase of that part of the house, and so that, which isn't to say those feelings won't come.
No.
Of anger and frustration and
fear and
all of those things, of course, but they're not anchored into a story now.
Yes.
They will be, like a little, I don't know, let's just say that it's a summer's day and my library's got patio doors that open out onto a terrace, and a little, a bird might have flown in. It might be a bit scared, and I can just gently usher that bird back outside where it belongs, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Or maybe there's a nice butterfly or a buzzing bee that's annoying me, a wasp, or, things.
A fly that just won't
fly.
go away.
Bzz, oh, for goodness me. So, and I can deal with that, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Which is different. They're still there, but it's different to them being a volume in the library.
Yeah.
That's a choice of mine.
Is the attributing it to certain stories. So self-awareness is understanding, as we're talking, this is gaining more shape and colour and whatever. So understanding that buzzing, instead of it being an automatic attribution to, that is something that has frustrated me before, therefore it is frustrating, because I remember that book, it was great.
Yeah.
And it really irritated me. So I'll read it again later. Now I can see what it is. That is a small amount of high frequency energy buzzing around.
Yeah. That's
awesome. I wonder how I could use that.
Which is very different to, I am frustrated by people and myself when they procrastinate. That's a very different thing to saying I am a procrastinator. Which isn't to say you never procrastinate.
No.
Because we all do that. But if I am, that means the book is on your shelf.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if you're saying I am, it's a belief that you have about yourself. And the beautiful thing about that is you can change those any time you like. And when you're talking about the beautiful Brené, she's got a technique for not putting too much on her plate, which she shared, and she's got this ring, and it's a spinning ring. So it's a solid ring, but it's got some elements in the middle that spin. And whenever anybody asks her to do something, Brené, can you bring a cake to the thing on Friday? She'll spin her ring 3 times, which gives her a pause, just enough time. Is that on the jagged edge? And then she'll say, I'm sorry, I don't have time to do that. The end.
Yeah.
So, sometimes that's a way of some of these little techniques, a little pause, a little bit of time. If we know that we're the person who is, because of these beliefs that we have about ourselves, motivated for whatever reason to go, yes, I will bring the cake to the thing on Friday, even though we really don't have time to make or even buy a cake. Spin the metaphorical whatever. And so one thing is noticing it incoming. Another thing is giving yourself a bit of space, even a breath or two, to notice, that's showing up, that fly's buzzing around.
Yeah.
Okay. Off you pop.
Yeah. And it talks to something we discussed in another episode around the games we play, because the games we play can feature quite big volumes in our libraries. And if we don't even know they're there, then we can't be self-aware.
That's true.
That they're on the shelf. And so, using that example again, God bless you, Brené. You're appearing quite a lot. And thank you, by the way, for your vulnerability and
Yeah.
for sharing this stuff. We
Agreed.
super appreciate it.
Yeah.
And just using that example again, without her using that pause moment to try and engage the self-awareness,
Yeah.
she could easily just reach for the library and go, well, I am that really busy person, so I'm like, right, fine, that's great. And that book could involve imposter syndrome as well as games and all sorts of things,
Yep.
limiting, blah, 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 blah.
Yep.
I'm not a good enough friend. Or we can make a very, very
Oh, yeah.
character-filled story about all of that stuff
Yep.
and go, fine, I'll just add it. Go, yeah, I'll bring the bloody cake. So it's
Yep.
really, really powerful stuff. And it's exhausting. Like self-awareness, for me, requires me to think quite hard about this stuff, not necessarily just because the subject or the things are difficult. It's because I am extremely skilled at disguising my library. So trying to, I might not even, I think I'm reading the newspaper. Actually, I'm reading a story. Mm-hmm. And I've worked out ways of like camouflaging this stuff so that I don't even notice it.
It's like at school when you're asked to cover your textbooks at the start of term. Not only have you covered them, but you've written something out, this is the news in here. It's actually a story. Mm-hmm. So that's interesting layers. There are layers to peel away. And for me, personally, the reason I came up with the image of a library is because that's a comforting place for me. As you may know, I love the written word, books. Those things are supportive. If you don't like those things, a library is probably a bit triggering and not a great place. That's not the right room of your house to be doing this stuff. Because I could sit in the library with a nice cup of tea.
Yeah.
And just soak it all in. I'm happy there. There's a nice comfy chair. There's a little fire. I'm happy as Larry. Do you know what I mean? So welcoming all of that almost and choosing to hang out there, which is your point, and seeing that as something that is actually, when it all boils down to it, what I've discovered about myself is that although I've got lots of kind of short stories, if you like, I can put all of those short stories into some big anthologies, and they are based around fear. I'm frightened, and based around not being good enough, and based around not being worthy of being loved. Those are the three big volumes in, and they are, there's lots of, I'm afraid I'm not worthy of being loved, parts 1 to 125. I mean, they're big collections.
Yes.
But those are the three big themes for myself that I've discovered. And a tool that I've used personally is to write things down without judging them, that journaling vibe. For me, the act of writing stops me ruminating on it so much because it gets it out of my brain where it's going round and round on some kind of hamster wheel and onto a piece of paper. And I find that really nice sometimes to come back and look over some of the things I've written. And I don't do it every day. And it's sometimes I go back and I think, God, I'm choosing to get that book off the shelf all the time. Okay. And it helps me notice. That was the dog going, that wasn't me or Paul, if you could hear it.
The dog just leant on his pig toy and it made a nice oink. What I was thinking about is, when I was saying that I find self-awareness can be tiring, I think thinking about it more, it's actually around the rewriting the story.
Right.
That's the hard bit. Because you don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, so you've got to pick out the good stuff. Let's keep the good bits, and then we can just throw the carcass away because I don't need that bit anymore. That's the bit that's difficult. And there was something else that has just left me, which is marvellous. I was also thinking about, I'm not although I am very curious and I love learning, I find books a bit of a barrier for me. I do struggle with that, and when I'm more resourceful, I force my way through.
Yep.
And just, grin and bear it and get on with it. And the way I learn best or retain things best, is by trying to apply them quickly.
So if
I'll read a bit and apply it. Now, what I find interesting about the library visual is that because I'm curious, I'm sat around looking at all these books going, gosh, there's so many things to look at. So I'm not going, oh dear, because it's real books. And with the writing down, I might just make a note on my phone.
Yeah, make a voice note. Quite.
Or I might just type a note on my phone or send myself a message or whatever. And it is important to externalise these things outside of my head. I have to form them into real words that a person could read.
Yes.
And they would know what those 5 words, sentence, paragraph.
Because you're making sense of it for yourself.
It's super, super, super important.
I agree.
It's like otherwise it's like trying to describe a dream. Yeah. Unless you can tell someone your dream immediately,
they float off.
They wander off, and then they don't make any sense. They don't make sense most of the time anyway.
No, but you're right to... And in the immediacy, you might not have... if you want to physically write it, which is my personal choice, I wouldn't always have my journal. So the other day I was walking the dog, and I made a voice note on my phone of something that had occurred to me, because I was plodding along in this really muddy field and feeling leaden of foot, and this is a chore. So I was choosing to feel that, poor me, and etc. And then I could hear this buzzard, and I looked up, and it took off from a fence post, and it just soared. This beautiful bird soaring, and I thought, that's also a choice. And so that was a little brain fart I had, and I made a note of it on my phone because I wanted to write about it later. So I could get the book from my shelf that's about soaring and ease, which isn't to say it's easy, but because the field is still muddy and my legs are still tired. However, I can. It's my perspective and my point of view, and I can pull that story from whatever anthology I choose, and that's why I made the note, and and it made me really smile, and I lifted my own mood, and then off I went again. The field was no less muddy. I just felt better about it.
Yeah, self-awareness. I remember working with someone a while ago that I was coaching, and they'd never heard... English was their second language. They'd never heard the term before.
Right.
So had to start...
Did they understand the concept, even though they never heard the term?
Well, they didn't know what it was, so I had to explain what it was, and then they were like, oh, right, yeah, okay. Yeah, I don't really know. So it's like saying, by the way, did you know you have a library in your house?
Yes. I've also had that library? Experience, yeah.
And it's very, it's a privileged position to be in, to accompany someone on that initial exploration of their own library. And again, it's just scanning the shelves and seeing what sorts of things are there.
Yeah.
And then noticing the impact that has for them. It's always a positive impact. It doesn't mean it's easy or it's pleasant, comfortable.
No.
I've never really... Well, I suppose I have experienced something that's pleasant. I wouldn't say it's necessarily comfortable. I had to wrestle with the idea first of all, and then to try and make sense of it. So invariably, it is something that, there's self-awareness. There's a reason why we have varying degrees of self-awareness. Because we all have the opportunity to be totally enlightened.
Yes.
Like, completely enlightened.
Yes.
We've all got that opportunity. So there's reasons why we have varying degrees of self-awareness. Some of them we choose. Some of them we're not even aware that there's a choice.
Mm-hmm.
We don't even question if there's a choice.
No, it's so automatic.
Yeah. Preconditioned.
And some of these are imprints. Some of these stories we accepted a long time ago.
Yeah.
When we were children even, all that stuff around the brain formation, and by the time you're 3, your personality is formed. Well, what that is effectively is you as your own personal librarian admitting all these volumes into your library.
Yes.
And that we're not consciously aware of that. And that still happened. So some of the self-awareness is just about, as you were saying, A, realising that library is there, and B, looking at what's on the shelves, because we might not even consciously know.
What occurred to me is that we aren't actually the authors of all of those books.
No, but they do get handed to us, and we do take them on.
That's right. So my point is this. By the age of 5, you have received all the imprints and instructions from adults or people of an authority or whatever in your life. By the age of 5, you received all the imprints that last your entire life around right and wrong, good and bad, all these kind of things. And those are, so it's almost like we're making notes about someone else's story.
Yeah.
And we're going, right, okay, so I can just make, right, okay, fine. And then here's the story compiled from multiple people or one person or whatever.
Yeah, because that's echoed through generations potentially.
And then we put it on the shelf.
Mm-hmm.
You need this book, by the way. You haven't got it yet. Let me give you this book. In fact, I can't give you mine, so I'm going to just tell you about it. And through your lived experience, you're going to then make notes of it and put it on your shelf.
You're not good enough, and that's the title of the book.
Yeah.
And that's our parents are not intentionally causing us harm with any of this. It's unconscious, a lot of it. But we get these imprints, and in they go.
And that can come from teachers. It can come from anyone in a position of perceived authority to the child.
Can do that.
Agreed. So then, we've then got other stories which come from our childlike place, which can be fun and joyful and excitable, and they can also not have so many words in them because they might just be more onomatopoeic, like boom, bang, crash, pop, so they can't necessarily clearly articulate the scenery. What they can do is show you that you're really, angry, there's a raging fire or something like this. And so it's kind of interesting because there are all these different stories that are floating around that we have that are written in different ways, some by us, all curated by us.
Yes.
And I think the rewriting point we were talking about before is the opportunity for us to look at them in context. I'm reaching for this story over here that is a picture book, actually, about being angry. And there's lots of explosions and big fires and whatever else. And I'm reaching for this book over here that is about not being good enough. Now, I can choose in that moment whether the not good enough book and the angry book are actually helpful for the situation or not, or whether I'd actually like to write a different book.
And I think that there's something around how long these things have been hanging around. Mm-hmm. Some of these are well-thumbed volumes, and as you said, Paul, we get them when we are, whether we're the authors or not is irrelevant, we get them when we are children, a lot of this stuff. And then what we do for the rest of our lives is seek out certainty that confirms these stories are true. It's confirmation bias in action. And we're looking for things. So, for example, I don't feel worthy of being loved. So I'm going to deliberately choose friendships, relationships, work situations, all sorts of interactions with other people which confirm that to me and give me certainty about that.
Otherwise, what's my library full of?
Quite.
It's full of crap.
So
I don't want that.
So if we know that these things are there, we know that our lives are driven to give us certainty. And then if we invest in a little bit of light editing or some full-on rewriting here and there, well, then we open up the possibilities, huge, infinite possibilities of things being different for ourselves. Because then if you've got a different story, we're still going to look for certainty.
Yes, and it's also great if we're able to, instead of thinking, I'm certain I've got all the right books in my library, I could also say, maybe I've not got all the right books in my library, and that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely right.
So I might add some, I might take some out.
Yeah.
So I don't, therefore, if I stop trying to, this is really, really, really powerful. And I guess this isn't about full enlightenment. This is simply about trying to emancipate ourselves, give some agency to ourselves.
Yeah.
To be able to say, that's a really, that's super. I've seen that story before. I've read that book lots of times. I just don't want that bit anymore.
No, and if we accept that a lot of these stories, certainly the big ones, were given to us and we unconsciously run them all the time, if we become conscious and aware of what's on the shelf, we didn't write that. It was given to us as an impression, as a whatever, right? For me personally, I find it hugely it's full of hope, and I'm absolutely excited and fizzing at the possibility that I can write my own story. I can simply choose, I say simply, it's not as easy as I'm making it out to be, the things that were not written by me, if they don't serve me, and some of them will, and if they don't, I rewrite that fella. So the book that's called I'm Not Worthy of Love becomes the Love Chronicles. And I look for certainty everywhere that I am worthy of love and belonging. Thank you, Brené, because that's what she says. Because in her work about that, the only difference between the people who had love and belonging and the people who didn't is that the people who had it believed they were worthy of it. That was their internal story. They believed they were worthy. The end.
It is so beautiful.
Really is.
And it's a journey, right?
Yeah, man.
It's not a fixed place in time. Self-awareness can vanish in a moment.
Yes, it can.
And it can pop in a moment.
Yes.
And it does require deliberate effort.
Yes.
Willingness.
Yes.
Willingness. Just being willing to do that pause ritual, whatever that pause thing happens to be. You just need to be willing to do that as opposed to just immediately responding. And I love the idea of changing that from I'm Not Worthy of Love to the Love Chronicles. Just the name, just calling it that is just... I'd actually really like to read that book.
I can see the front cover now. I can see it.
You know what I mean, though? Just being able to... who wants to read I'm Not Worthy of Love? Well, it's familiar, so it's comfortable. It's a chair I've sat in before.
Yeah.
So, I could read it, I suppose. I think I pretty much know.
And actually, it's not much effort required because I've read it so many times.
Yep.
Like when you're reading your children a story.
I'm going on a bear hunt.
Yeah, the other week, the Gruffalo came on the telly over Christmas, and I knew it off by heart. My son is 13. It's years since I've read the Gruffalo, and it's still inside me. And that's what these stories are like. They're automatic at some point. We know them off by heart.
Whereas this point of hope and this curiosity, I wonder what's in the Love Chronicles. I wonder, because I'm not sure what's in there. And I like the book is very appealing. It looks nice. Want to open the front cover and get cracking.
Exactly.
Yeah, very, very cool. So self-awareness is, it's quite a big space, really.
It is, isn't it?
There's room for lots of things.
Yeah. Isn't that lovely?
And I think the thing around certainty, I'm certain I'm self-aware, I'm certain this story is right, I'm certain I'm right, is one of the things that can trip us up.
Sorry, I just butted the microphone. The thing that is in my head is that question, are you certain enough to be uncertain? Can you entertain the possibility that other things are there?
Mm-hmm. Why can't there be the book The Love Chronicles? Or I'd like to be able to think of some other cool names of books for, the Brave, Bold and Curious, the book of the something else.
The Journeys into Joy. I don't know. I'm just trying to think of something to do with peace, because we talked about anger. But, not the Pickwick Papers, the Peaceful Papers. But, this is your imagination will have an absolute field day with all this stuff.
And just noticing how quickly we could come up with the other story titles and how much harder it is to come up with, the story titles we're very familiar with. It's very easy for us to come up with the names of those, and we can name the books and pick them up and eat. Great, super. Coming up with other names, which might be like, instead of I'm Not Worthy of Love, The Love Chronicles, coming up with more of those sorts of names is harder. So it does require some attention. We need to notice it.
I was talking to somebody the other day in a coaching conversation, and they were talking about different ways of thinking, which is one of the parts of self-awareness, tuning into how I'm thinking and the possibility of thinking in a different way. And they were saying the way that they used to, it's like an 8-lane highway. It is big, it's wide, it is very well travelled. And the way that they want to think is like a little woodland path. Even the entrance is a bit overgrown with brambles. You might walk straight past it and not even know it was there. So to your point, Paul, there is focus and some effort required to walk up and down that path enough so that the nettles stay back and the brambles don't overgrow the entrance and you can see to get down it. And, I think the image is as you do that and as you walk up and down that path, the 8-lane superhighway go down to 4 lanes. 3 lanes. It doesn't become, because it just shrinks naturally because you're not going on it as much.
One of the biggest tools maybe for my self-awareness and maybe yours comes down to one word: choices. Because all of this stuff starts with a choice.
Yep.
Nice.
Beauty.
Kashblamo.
You're welcome.
Tutty bye, peeps.
See you later.
Curious Brain Thoughts.